The first army arrived at dawn. Sierra heard them before she saw them, the low, rhythmic crunch of boots on gravel, the clank of drawn steel, the particular silence that 1,000 men make when they are trying to be quiet and failing at it. She was already awake. She had been awake since midnight, when the old Drake's breathing had changed. He breathed differently now than he had 3 days ago before the scouts had come. 3 days ago it was the deep, slow cycle of a sleeping ancient, long exhale, longer pause, a vibration in the stone beneath her bedroll. Now it was shallower, more careful. The kind of breathing that meant he was listening. Sierra was 16 years old, and she had been the mountain's keeper since her father died of a fever 2 winters back, and she was not going to move from the doorway. The door itself was not much, a timber frame set into a natural rock arch, barely wide enough for 2 men abreast, at the base of the eastern slope of Mount Keth. It was the only way in. The tunnel behind it ran 40 feet through bedrock and opened into the chamber, and the chamber was where Voth slept. She stood in the arch with her back to the dark interior and her face toward the valley. The first army came from the east. She recognized the blue and gray standards of the merchant compact, the trading houses of Delvarn, operating out of the river cities. They had sent an envoy 9 days ago, a man in a pressed coat who had explained very calmly that the dragon's hoard represented an economic resource that the compact was prepared to extract by whatever means necessary. Sierra had told him the same thing she told everyone. The hoard was not an economic resource. It was Voth's home. The envoy had left without arguing, which she had found more frightening than arguing would have been. The column emerged from the tree line 300 yards down the slope and stopped at the edge of the clearing. A rider separated from the front rank and walked his horse up alone, stopping 30 feet from the arch. He was a big man, riding a bigger horse, and he wore the compact's sigil embossed in silver on his chest. "Step aside, girl," he said. Sierra did not step aside. "The instrument of survey was filed lawfully in Delvarn," the rider continued, as though she had asked for clarification. "The mountain is categorized as unmaintained sovereign wilderness. The compact has right of extraction under the—" "He was alive before the compact existed," Sierra said. "He was alive before Delvarn was a village." The rider looked at her the way adults looked at children who had said something technically accurate but were understood to be wrong. "Step aside." "No." That was when the second army came out of the trees. They emerged from the western side of the clearing. The kingdom of Marath's winter banner, red and black, 100 cavalry in full kit, fanning out along the tree line with the unhurried precision of soldiers who had been positioned for hours. The cavalry commander rode forward from the Marath line and stopped 20 feet to the left of the compact rider, and the 2 men looked at each other with the particular wariness of 2 parties who had each been certain they were arriving first. Sierra watched both of them. She had not moved. "The mountain lies within the claimed territory of the Crown of Marath," the cavalry commander announced, speaking to the clearing at large. "All assets within the boundary are subject to Crown authority. The boundary you're citing was contested at Braille 2 years ago," the compact rider said, not looking at him. "And subsequently upheld." "Subsequently" is doing significant work in that sentence. Sierra had heard versions of this argument 4 times in the past 9 days, from 4 different envoys and 2 different courier riders, and she was no longer surprised by it. Both parties believed they owned the mountain. Both parties believed the mountain's value was the hoard. Both parties had armies. Neither party had asked Voth. Nobody ever asked Voth. What they had asked every time was why she was still here. She was 16 and alone and had no legal standing in any court in the lowlands. Her answer was always the same, because someone had to be. Because the mountain was not ownerless just because its owner had no paper to prove it. Because her grandfather had made a promise to something older than promises, and her father had kept it, and she was her father's daughter. She heard his breathing behind her, that slow, careful attention, and she stayed where she was. "There is a third matter," said a third voice. She had not seen the third column arrive. They were on the northern slope, which was steep and scrubby, and which she had thought impassable to formed troops. She had been wrong. The Brotherhood of the Gilded Hand, relic hunters, independent contractors, operating under a dozen different writs from a dozen different noble houses, had come up through the ravine with the efficient silence of men who were paid specifically to go where no one expected them. They numbered perhaps 200, and they carried tools as well as weapons, coils of heavy rope, iron drags, the kind of low, flat-bottomed carts used for moving large and heavy objects. Their leader was a woman, iron-haired and unhurried, wearing a plain brown coat with no sigil on it at all. "The Brotherhood has contracts with 6 of the 12 houses recognized under the Delvarn Charter," she said pleasantly. "We are not here for the mountain. We are here for the Hoard." A silence settled over the clearing. 3 forces, 3 different claims, and between all of them, one girl in a timber doorway. The cavalry commander said slowly, "Move, child." "No," Sira said. She heard the horses shift. She heard the click of arbalists being cranked. She heard the Brotherhood's iron-haired leader say something quietly to the man beside her, and whatever it was, the man began to laugh, and then stopped when he realized no one else was laughing. The compact rider made a gesture to 2 of his soldiers, and they dismounted and began to walk toward the arch. Sira watched them come. They were not running. They were the professional kind of men who did not need to run. They just kept walking, steadily, as if the outcome had already been determined and the walking was a formality. She did not move. She put her hands flat against the sides of the door frame, not as a bar, but simply as a statement of position. They stopped 6 feet away. One of them looked her in the eye and then looked at something behind her, and whatever he saw in the dark of the tunnel made him look back at the compact rider with an expression that was harder to read than the one he had left with. The rider made the same gesture again, more sharply. The 2 soldiers did not move forward. "What is it?" the compact rider called. The soldier said nothing. He took 1 step backward, which was not a retreat, but was in the same family. The sound that came next was not from any of them. It started in the rock beneath Sira's feet, a low vibration, barely felt, more sensation than sound. It moved up through the stone of the arch around her and into the timber of the door frame and into her spine. The horses in the clearing felt it before their riders did. 3 animals at the front of the compact column stepped backward in unison, and one of them reared, and its rider caught it cursing. Then Voth put his head through the doorway. He did not squeeze through it. The door frame had been built wide enough for exactly this. Sira's grandfather had built it 3 generations back, understanding that the dragon would occasionally want to see outside, and that the outside needed to occasionally see the dragon. Voth's head cleared the arch by several inches on each side. He was golden-scaled and enormous, and he had been alive for longer than the oldest language anyone in the clearing still spoke, and he moved with the unhurried weight of something that had seen many armies come to many mountains and had always been present when they left. He did not roar. He did not breathe fire. He looked at the clearing the way a person looks at something they recognize without surprise, and then he lowered his chin to rest on the top of Sira's head with the slow, deliberate gentleness of an animal that understood exactly how large it was. The horses lost their composure entirely. The compact cavalry broke first, not a retreat exactly, but the animals made the decision before their riders did, and by the time the riders caught them, they were already at the edge of the tree line. The Brotherhood's carts did not have horses, but the men who had been standing nearest to the arch found reasons to be standing further away. The Marath cavalry held longer, which was a credit to their discipline, but their horses had opinions that discipline could not entirely override. The iron-haired woman from the Brotherhood was the only one who did not move. She stood her ground and looked at Voth with an expression that was not fear, but was a cousin of it, the look of someone revising her understanding of a situation in real time. Sira did not move either. She could feel the weight of Voth's chin on her skull, not uncomfortable, not particularly warm, simply there. A fact. "You have surveyed your contracts," she said to the clearing, pitching her voice to Carrie. "You have read your charts. You have decided this mountain belongs to whoever arrives with enough men." She paused. "I have lived here my whole life. My father lived here, his mother before him. We are the keepers of this door, and the door is not locked, and the key is not force." The cavalry commander had gotten his horse under control. He was a professional, and professionals rallied. The Crown's claim is a line on a map drawn 80 years ago by a surveyor who never came within 30 miles of this peak, Sira said. "Voth has been in that mountain since before your kingdom was a claim." "That is not how sovereignty works," the compact writer said flatly. "He is older than sovereignty," Sira said. Another silence. Above her, Voth breathed slowly, his exhale warm against her hair. The iron-haired woman spoke, and her voice was more careful now. "What is it that you are proposing, child?" "I am not proposing anything," Sira said. "I am telling you what is true. The Hoard is not a resource. It is not an asset. It is not extractable. Voth sleeps in it the way you sleep in your home, and the man who goes in there to take from it will not come back out, and the man who sent him will have spent something he cannot recover for something he will never hold." She looked at the compact writer. "You know this. Your surveyor told you the same thing. You sent him anyway to see if I would move." The writer was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "You're a child." "I am," Sira agreed. "That's why you thought it would work." Voth lifted his head from the top of hers, and the motion was slow, and everyone in the clearing watched it. He was very large. The full span of his neck visible above the arch was wider than a cart horse measured from withers to ground, and his scales caught the dawn light in a way that was not spectacular, but was simply, densely real, each one slightly different from the one beside it, weathered and ancient and singular, the accumulated surface of something that had been alive for centuries beyond counting. He regarded the clearing with one eye. His iris was deep gold, and his pupil was vertical and roughly the size of a cartwheel. Then he withdrew back into the mountain, and the arch was empty again except for Sira. It took the armies a long time to leave. The Brotherhood went first, the iron-haired woman pausing at the tree line to look back at Sira with something in her expression that was not quite an apology but was its near neighbor. The Marath cavalry took longer. The commander had his dignity to manage, and dignity required a certain amount of standing in place before withdrawing. But eventually the red and black standards disappeared into the western trees. The compact column moved last, and the rider did not look back at all, which Sira had expected. By the time the clearing was empty, the sun was fully up. She stood in the doorway for another 10 minutes, watching the last of the compact's rear guard vanish around the slope's bend. When the final glint of polished armor disappeared into the trees, and the clearing held nothing but birdsong and shadow, she let out a breath she had been holding since midnight. Then she turned and walked back through the tunnel into the dark, and at the far end of it, in the warmth of the deep chamber, Voth lay coiled around the Hoard with his eyes half open, and the Hoard glimmered softly in the phosphorescent light of the cavern walls. She did not say anything. She crossed to her bedroll at the near wall and sat down on it. Voth watched her with one eye the way he always did, not with gratitude exactly, not with the particular expression of an animal that had been saved, but with the quiet, specific attention of something that had watched many people face many armies and knew, with the certainty of long experience, when one of them would not yield. His tail shifted, the tip of it settling near her feet, with the unhurried weight of something very old expressing something that did not quite have a word in any living language. She leaned against the cave wall and closed her eyes. She was asleep before the sound of the last horse faded from the valley below. Outside, the clearing lay empty in the morning light. The birds had started up again in the trees. The mountain was very quiet. It had been quiet before the armies came. It would be quiet long after them. The girl in the doorway was simply the reason they had not made a difference between those two silences. That was what keepers were for.